Good morning. We are in a rare cycle. We're going to read the Old Testament in our Bible in a year. And ironically, today is Job chapter 1 and 2. I just say ironically because it's the absolute beginning of a very long book, the book of Job. And it just so happens to be today, which caught my attention. So here we go. This is titled The Prologue. That sounds like a real book. Verse 1, Job 1. In the land of Uz, or Uz, U-Z, you pronounce it. The land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, which is 1,000 ox, 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. You know, I never knew that. The greatest man. I mean, his holdings were spectacular. I mean, this is a deserted area. I mean, just to feed 7,000 sheep. The greatest man among. Wow. His sons used to hold feast in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. That's to point out how puritanical, that's not the right word, but how devout Job is. My children might have made a mistake in their revelry. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. That's an interesting way. Satan was an angel, but now they're calling him the angels and Satan, so he's been separated out. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Now, I'm pretty sure the fact that Jesus asked Satan where you come from is meaningful because God already knows that. So where do you come from? But I guess in a way, you would argue, since God already knows this, the fact that Satan replied the way he did is the more important insight. Because I don't think, now you gotta put this in time frame here. This is when travel was by foot or by very, very slow animal carriage. And like, he's not riding around in the desert countries in a chariot, like speedily along. So Satan has a supernatural power. He's implying you don't roam the whole earth in the Middle Ages by horse or by foot. So you have a supernatural power to be pretty much anywhere you want, almost instantly. I'm guessing instantly. I don't know if he has to fly or not. But that's rather interesting that he can be anywhere he wants at any time. The whole earth. That's a supernatural power. And you go, well, why is that important? Well, because the people that you see that are super famous, super wealthy, seemingly everything in their life or their family always works out at spectacular levels. those riches and rewards and provisions come from a supernatural enemy of your soul. And the devil is presented as a cartoon character with a trident and a fork or a serpent's tail and a little red suit. So basically, people present the devil as kind of a harmless character, kind of a little jokester. And it's like, there's nothing harmless about this man or his powers on earth. It's very, very powerful. You do not roam throughout the earth. It's just a spectacular. You can't even do that today. I mean, you can fly from one point to another point. If you're a jet setter, you own your own plane. But roaming throughout the whole earth, I mean, you're talking about, at a time there were no jets or cars or trains. There's a supernatural power that God's given Satan, which is just very interesting, I think. It reminds you, if you pay attention to it, it reminds you Satan has on earth, and he said it to Jesus, I have been given the power to give you all the wealth of the kingdoms of earth. Anyway, it's rather interesting. From where have you come from? And Satan could say, everywhere. I've been everywhere. And that, in a way, also informs us he is everywhere. Not to the level of God, but his ability to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Not everywhere at one time. That's omnipresent.
Right.
But to be anywhere he wants, whenever he wants. Not everywhere at once. So there's a distinction between his authority and God's. But there's shades. He can be anywhere. So, in other words, the enemy is he's busy about doing his work all over the world. And people pretend he's not.
Yeah.
Or have been convinced he's a make-believe. And it's like, Job is going to reveal in this very, very beginning, that's, in this dialogue, it's not pretend. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Now, bring to mind, if you're familiar with the book of Job, what you think about Job. You think suffering, persecuted, confused, he doesn't understand why. Basically, you're presented a man that's, to a certain degree, abused by neglect. By God, he's not protecting him. And by intentional attack by Satan, which is between, proverbially speaking, a rock and a hard place. Wait, God's not going to shield him? And Satan has a heyday destroying him? Wow. But before you think about that, who is God? How did God define Job? Twice. This is God's Bible. So the first thing he said, he was the greatest man among the people of the East. But then after Satan had said, I've been trapped, I'm going back and forth across the world. He said, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He's one of a kind. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Now that's the second time they've defined Job as a man who fears God and shuns evil. They described it in verse 1. He feared God and shunned evil. So you go, wait, you've just repeated God says this. By the way, the longest conversation that God ever has in sequence is in the book of Job, in history, recorded history, ever. It's the last 4 chapters of Job, the single longest dialogue, which really was a monologue because Job didn't say much. He just kind of stood there. So this book's important for a number of reasons. One is God spent a lot of time in here. Two is this is, outside of the temptation of Christ, really the only example of somebody that, a human that was sent as a centerpiece between good and evil, God's good, Satan's evil. And it's like, obviously Job's important, but there's a big swath of Job that seems to be the pain of Job. But this beginning's interesting. You should take time to spend, because you're supposed to a certain degree, Job is supposed to represent the best of mankind. Satan, the worst of angelic power. And God, as having faith in man, that a model example, Job, is able to withstand the worst of the enemy. And remember, I did point this out, but I didn't make my point. So here's Job. God says there is no one like him on earth. Now, if you're a Christian or any type of man of faith, if God says, here's Tom, there is no man on earth like him. Here's Susie. There's no woman like her on earth. If God pays attention to your life and recognizes it as a unique jewel, which I'd like to say our fingerprint and our retina scan prove we're unique, but God recognizes Job's one of a kind. You would go, what is it then, Lord, about Job that matters? What is it that you would say pointedly, there's no one on earth like him? What is it about Job? And the irony is, here's the answer to the riddle. So you go, oh, okay, let me put in, I would like to be known before God as one of a kind. I would think most Christians would, but they would probably say, well, yeah, sure I would, but come on. There's 8 billion of us. What makes me unique? So you'd instantly write it off. You'd say, well, that sounds great. I'd love to, but come on, it's not realistically practical. So just pretend that, just ignore that. And I'm like, why not? God pointed out that Job was no one else on earth like him. And you're like, so what was it about him that made him one of a kind? That's what you should be asking. What would be about my life that makes me one of a kind? One of one. In the eyes of God. And by the way, I do think I'm one of one. It's just, saying that to people sounds like the height of pride. But then why do I have a fingerprint no one else has? Right? A DNA sequence no one else has. So it's like, for humankind, there's a bit of a battle. We know we're one of one, but the world basically makes us feel like we're unimportant. But God's taken one man as a reference, and what he's saying is, I pay attention to this one man. And you go, well, Lord, I would like you to pay attention to me. I'd like to have a relationship with you that's sincere and significant, important and unique. Just the way you made me, one of one, Lord. I want that relationship. And you would say, so how do you have that? How do you have that relationship? He gave you the answer to the question, if you cared to pay attention. And actually gave you the answer to the question twice. He said, I'm going to read it carefully so you can get it. He said, verse 8, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him, semicolon. Not period, but semicolon. So now I'm going to explain to you why there's no one on earth like Job. Because it's a continuation of thought. That's what the semicolon is. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Now, this is the second time. In the very first verse, it said, describing Job, he feared God and shunned evil. Blameless and upright. Actually uses the same phrase twice. In the land of Uz. I wonder if it's Uz or Uz. I think Uz sounds better, but in the land of Uz, there is a man who fears God, is blameless and upright. So here's the point. If you want to have a relationship with God that's so amazingly intimate and unique, you have to fear God, be upright, be blameless, shun evil. So, and I would say fearing God and shunning evil is why he's blameless and upright. Okay, so it's like, if you fear God and shun evil, you will be blameless and upright. And if you're blameless and upright, fear God and shun evil, he notices you. And it's like, oh, so when you're struggling with your sin, you're basically capitulating and saying, I don't really care if I'm that close to God. Because you have to fear God and shun evil to be close to God. And Jesus gave us the way to God through his death on the cross so that we can be blameless. I don't want to struggle with my sin my whole life. And actually, I don't want to struggle with it all. I want to fear God, stand upright, be blameless, and shun evil. Fear God and shun evil. I have no interest in that. You have a world that's trying to drench you through music, media, pornography, divorce, homosexuality, sin, fornication. It's trying to normalize the opposite of this.
Right.
The direct, in other words, Satan's intention. Fornication is not God's intention. He wants one man to be married to one woman and their relationship to be sacrosanct in marriage. Sacrosanct. I'm not sure I'm saying that word right. And it's like, you're saying that God sees him as no one of a kind on earth because and then he describes it. He's blameless, upright, fears God, and shuns evil. And I like I said, I don't think you have to remember 4:4 sometimes. He fears God and he shuns evil. That makes him blameless and upright. Yeah. And you're like, fear God and avoid evil. Is that what he says? Shuns it. To shun something means you make a determination to hate it. To like, I don't want anything to do with that. The movies that you see, the sites on the internet, your drinking habits, your behavior. I shun evil. I have no interest, zero interest. Sometimes I got a dinner at a restaurant at the bar because I was by myself for a long time and I was watching the soccer match, and the whole time I'm at the bar, it just, all I had is a Coke. And my wife came and she had a tea. No time you kept thinking, I just don't belong here. And it was a beautiful place. It was on the water in Florida. It was gorgeous, really. But I just didn't belong here. Now, are you saying look, all I'm saying is I don't drink. I don't drink a drop of alcohol. And that was to shun evil. Alcohol tends to make you loose moralistically. They call the booze spirits. That should give you a bit of an insight. The industry calls it the spirit industry. Spirits industry. Distilled spirits. Yeah. And the point is, shunning evil is an active behavior. It's not passive. Right. You don't passively shun. You actively shun. And it's something that Job does, and God recognizes it and calls him unique on earth. Shunning evil, fearing God. God forbid. Now, you can go, well, that's kind of weird. You can't walk into a restaurant that has, I did not say I can't. But this is a very unique, it's very, very rare I sit at the bar because I was by myself. I didn't want to hog up a table in a small restaurant by myself when my wife was busy in a meeting. So I thought, well, this is easy, this is convenient, I'll sit there. But I will say, the whole time I felt slightly odd. Even though I bought a hamburger, I was eating their food, I bought a Coke, I drank their drinks. But you just didn't feel like you belonged there, is all I'm saying. I think that's from a habit of shunning evil. Doesn't make me holier than thou, it just means I practice what I'm preaching. In an example, in a real life example. Now, mind you, the angels are here while this conversation's going on. Because it said, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord. So, another thing that comes to mind is, in the end, in the eternal life, you will meet with God. And you will review what you've been doing. So there's work in heaven. Hopefully it's rewarding. I think of it as marvelous. I have a great expectation of it. Okay, so verse 8. There is no one like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Now, I think we should camp here for a second and ponder, why is he asking it that way? Because remember, Satan was a very clever devil, not more clever than God by any stretch. Does Job fear God for nothing? Well, all I can say is, it's a dumb question. No, there's reasons you should fear God. So for nothing is like, that's the opposite of having reasons. That would imply he would have to be a robot. Because you just stamp him with fearing God. No, there's reasons he fears God. He doesn't want to displease God. He wants to honor God. He wants to be rewarded by God. He wants his life to be in agreement with God. There's a lot of reasons. So it's not nothing. But the enemy is really good at twisting logic. Because logic says, that's a dumb question. Of course he has reasons. But asked in satanic cleverness, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable question. Same approach he had with Eve in the garden. Did God say you can eat none of the fruit? It's like, God didn't say that. No, it's not for nothing, which is a double negative, which is really hard, linguistically speaking, to have this dialogue. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Now, which is interesting. So here's a question, right? Normally you leave the question for an answer. He's going to answer his own question. This is monologue, but it's also rhetoric. Does Job fear God for nothing? He replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? And by the way, not stated, I can't get through your hedge. Because if he could, I'm sure Satan would love, well, you're going to see, he would love to wreak havoc in Job, this righteous man's life. Haven't you put a godly barrier? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. So Satan has just, and I would love to be brilliant here. I'm afraid I'm going to be pretty not brilliant, but he's setting up a pinnacle argument of man's devotion to God and the causation thereof. I will say it a different way. Why did men worship God? Oh, because you bless them. You give them all that they want. You're the lucky jackpot in their life, which is not a true statement. If you love Jesus Christ, it isn't because he gave you all that you wanted on earth. It's because he died to give you all that you could ever want in heaven by being a citizen of heaven, a son and daughter of God. Which is what they call your just reward for a righteous man or woman. So the point is, on earth, you may be blessed. But if you're a Christian, your love for God comes through Christ. That is your reward. But Satan, this is before Christ, is saying, well, Job only loves you because you basically pamper him. It's a very strong argument, because if anybody's ever had children, you pamper your kids, they love you. You know, but do they really love you? Take away the pampering. It doesn't mean they don't, but you know, any parent knows exactly what I mean by that phrase. And it's like, well, wait, you are literally putting in one of the pinnacle arguments or the questions of religious purpose, if you will, is does man only love God when he's blessed? That's what Satan would say. That's what Satan did say. You put a hedge around him, and verse 9, 10, you have blessed the works of his hands, so that his flocks and herds spread throughout the land. But now, stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Take it all away and see the evil in his heart. This, by the way, is something that Satan cannot resolve mentally. He thinks that all men are evil. And the only thing that prevents them from living evil is blessing. So it's kind of like a wall of blessing prevents an evil, a flood of evil. And it's like, let me just put it this way. If you've never read this before, that's a rather interesting, provocative claim. That's a shocking claim. He only is righteous and blameless because you bless him. It isn't the true character of him. And I think Job will nicely discredit Satan's accusation. But I will say this, it's going to cost Job everything to discredit it. 9 and 10. Okay, 12. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. You could almost see the joy in the enemy's eyes. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord, and immediately, he didn't say this, but you can imagine, it didn't take long. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine, because there's 10 of them, so almost every month there's going to be a party. At the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans, so Satan was able to stir up a tribe, attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Now wait, that's an interesting thing. They're blaming God for this tragedy. The fire of God. Well, it had to be Satan. But here's the thing. Satan has the ability to have a column of fire, a pretty amazing column. I don't know what else it would be. It's not a meteorite. Come down and burned up the sheep and the servants, and there were 7,000 sheep. I'm the only one that escaped you. While it was still, by the way, that would be a lie. The fire of God. Yeah. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans, wow, Chaldeans. So you have the Sabaeans and the Chaldeans. Wow, formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger, this is the 4th, came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind, that's like a hurricane or something, swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I'm the only one who's escaped to tell you. Well, I have no reason why it took 4 bad messengers with messages. But the house that Job had built was 4 corners. You know what I'm saying? And every corner was broken. His wealth, his family, his privilege, prestige, success, empire, children, all destroyed. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Wow. I mean, there's some real instruction there. So when you start blaming God for evil, according to this, you're sinning. In all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. He didn't blame God. That is a really meaty, meaningful lesson learned for us. He did not blame God for wrongdoing. That sin did not occur. Now I'm just going to keep on reading, even though this is going long. I could save it for tomorrow, but we'd have to come back. On another day, I'm going to tell you my predilections. Is the beginning and the end of Job are really, really valuable. And the middle part isn't unvaluable. It's just hard to, you get lost in these dialogues between Job's friends, accusations, suggestion of accusation, and it gets messy and you can get lost. Mm-hmm. But the beginning of it, of Job, and the end of Job is, I believe, one of a kind. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord. Now, so this is a regular occurrence. I don't know if it's all the angels or a certain select group. And Satan also came with them to present him before him. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered to the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it, like doing what I do best, causing problems, doing damage, wrecking the planet that you favor with humans. So, I'm just pointing out the enemy is all over this earth doing his best work. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and he still maintains his integrity. I mean, integrity is a concept of cohesion. There's no breaking up. You know, if you lose integrity in your car, it breaks up. In your mind, it breaks up. He has still maintained his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. I don't know, maybe he did have a fire column from God. I don't know. You incited me against him. Skin for skin. I really don't understand that phrase. Skin for skin. It's such a clever way of speaking. Skin for skin. Satan replied, a man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. Wow. So it's all boiling down to what the goal is, to see if you can get Job to curse God. And that is sin. Skin for skin. You know, skin for skin is only one letter from sin for sin. Skin for skin. I wonder if that's a euphemism. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat among the ashes. And I'll tell you this, by now, Job knows something spectacularly odd it just won't stop. If you have a bad day at the office, or you lose an account, or your investments go down, that's one thing. But when everything in your life is destroyed all at the same time, I would just say, sometimes when you have a sense that it's a spiritual battle, believe it is, and then fight it as such, spiritually speaking, through faith, through prayer, through unity. His wife said to him, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. Wow. I don't think Job picked the right wife there. Curse God and die. I imagine that's because no one else spoke to Job. This is the first phrase of someone speaking to him. I would argue that's one of the most painful things anybody has ever said to him. And he's going to get a whole lot of crazy things said after this, by his friends, no less. He replied, you are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Now, that's an interesting response, because he's now saying God has brought trouble. Previously, he did not charge God with wrongdoing. Now he's saying, so Job is now in the crucible of pain, in the crucible of faith. It's a fiery crucible that what's that verse that I used to live on? That the trial of your faith is more precious than gold when tested by fire, the crucible of fire, and proved to be worthy of praise, honor, and glory upon the Lord's return. It's the verse I lived on for 15 years under a terrible, terrible struggle with deprivation and poverty. You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? So now he sees that there's some trouble coming through God. And all this, Job did not sin in what he said. So Job is struggling. And God is involved with this, because he even said, you've incited me. You incited me against him. So I think at first, Job's piety probably just blanketed his mind from even God's involvement. Maybe it was bad luck, just misfortune. But when it got worse and worse, now it's really testing him in his soul. And now he says, shall we accept good from God and not trouble? And are you still there? There's a whole life in those two verses. A wife who's also, by the way, suffering. It's her children that have died. It's her. She's enjoyed the status of Job's extreme success and wealth, and now it's been yanked away. And why she would say to her own husband, "Curse God and die," that's how upset she is.
Yeah.
Shall we not accept good from God and not trouble? And that's interesting because Job's wife, I don't believe, says anything else. That was the only thing she says, I believe.
Well, it does show you the importance of what you say, so you don't.
Also shows you how important it is to marry a godly wife, that
Right.
even in the hard times,
Right.
and the extremely hard times, and the miserably terrible, rotten hard times. She's like, trust the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all of his troubles that had come upon him. That seems like a subtle word. Troubles? You call these troubles? I mean, there is no proper word for what Job has just suffered.
Destruction.
Yeah, it's cruel, but they just call it troubles. They set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. That sounds mythological. So, here we have a picture of a righteous man who shuns evil and fears God. And here's how he's presented, and now you see a man that's so despondent that his friends can't speak for a week, day and night, crushed by the weight of despondency and sorrow. Well, Job, I have to say, I'm looking forward to meeting you if I have the privilege in heaven. And I wonder if you would be willing to share just a fragment of the pain and agony. Or if it in heaven is like, no, that's my life on earth. I hope you share it just because it is appointed once for man to die, then judgment. We all die. As I get older, I feel closer to that truth. And Job is our example as recorded in the Bible of a man unlike any other man outside of Christ, who suffered so tragically that it's almost hard to describe it. I mean, you can read it, but it seems to, like, his three friends call it trouble, but when they saw him and started weeping, this is way beyond the principle of trouble. This is unlike any. You don't get in front of somebody so suffering that you can't speak to him for 7 days and night. You can't speak. That's what they said. No one said a word because they saw how great his suffering was. That is the weight of the universe pinned onto the shoulders of a mere human in suffering. The profound curtain of despair is like crashed upon his life. Like, all life is but a play, and we are mere actors. Okay. The play that Job's in is a one-man play. Anybody else outside, it's a one-man play. At the end then enters God. I'm sorry, at the beginning he enters, but Job, for a large portion of the Bible, is with his three friends trying to rationalize this terrible situation. But if you're in a play and the entire scaffolding crashes on your head, and your entire play and all you've invested just goes down with everything, because that's kind of his life. Like, it all crashed on him. Not around his ears, because you always hear about everything I built, my empire just crashed around my ears, just crashed around. No, crashed on him. This is in his heart. His children have been destroyed. His physical well-being, he's now full of disease and boils and scraping him off with pottery. Dogs are going to start licking his wounds. I mean, this man is the weight of depression. We just so handily bandy that about, like, oh, I'm depressed. It's a depressing day. I got a little depressed. No. Job is living. He's bottled. It's literally like perfumed despondency. How do we know? Because, sores is what they called him. So Satan went out from the presence and afflicted him with painful sores. Because they went to go and comfort him. That's what they said. We're going to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. And for a week they couldn't speak because of his great suffering. Now, I don't know. To me, it's a very interesting picture, because the men are speaking to Job aren't really going to be great examples of faith as Job is. So we already know that if you've ever read the book of Job, but they must have had a sensitive heart to at least recognize. And then I think supernaturally, their voices were stopped cold. And when your voice is stopped, your mind is stuck in neutral. They are literally planted in Job's suffering. He is the pot. They are in the main plant, and they have just come into his garden. And that garden is a garden of suffering. The garden of suffering, good and evil, because Satan was there. That's his power. If he focuses on one individual, he can do the damage. But what's our takeaway here? If you want to be unique to God, shun evil, fear God. And understand there's usually meaning in suffering that isn't obvious when it occurs. But in the eyes of God, it's important. Job is so important to God. He was willing to put the entire weight of mankind's character into this relative moment of time, relative to the time of humanity. I'm saying it's not going to be a day. It's going to be a long period of time that's not carefully defined. We're going to assume it lasted months, maybe weeks. I don't know. It could just become days. But they spent a week just starting a conversation with them. So that gives you a clue that this was not going to be snap your fingers. And so God was willing to put I shouldn't want to say that phrase. He was, for lack of better ways, I just say he was willing to bet on Job as a representative human character in the face of satanic onslaught. And that character withstood the storm. That's what we should do. Amen? Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that this message would get to ears that could hear it, and it would speak to their heart. And I pray that Job's example would be a blessing to all of us who are men and women of faith, and those who are unsaved, they would get saved. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.